This is episode number 42 of the Silver Track Extra.
Thanks for tuning in to the Silver Track Extra, your source for the best tips, tricks, and how-tos to dominate the security industry, helping you improve your business, win more contracts, and crush your competition. Here are your hosts, Chris Anderson and Johnny Page.
What's up, Silver Track Nation? Johnny Page here along with Chris Anderson, and we are kicking off an amazing campaign for episode number 42. Today, Chris, we are launching the ultimate guide to running your security dispatch center. And today, Chris, we're just talking about the basics of really assessing the need, assessing quality versus cost, and really how to go about moving this from something that your supervisors are doing in the field on like a part-time basis to really becoming a full-time call center, whether you're outsourcing it or keeping it in-house. So pretty exciting subject for a company at this particular stage, because that means they're growing, right? You're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, I'm excited about this ebook. This is going to be really valuable for our Silver Track Nation, and because dispatch is a huge cost either way, John.
Absolutely. And so just as a little background for our listeners, this is something that's been in the works for a couple of months now. We've gone through, and this will be part of a 4 or 5 show series, all of which will pick a specific part of this, how to run your dispatch center. Each episode is going to focus in on a different element of that, and all of these elements are contained in one ultimate guide that we are calling the Ultimate Guide to Running Your Security Dispatch Center, which is part of an ebook that you can download in the show notes of this episode. And without any further ado, Chris, let's just jump straight into how can you start assessing the need, knowing that, maybe my supervisor's answering the phones overnight or throughout the day is not necessarily the best way I could be going about taking these calls for service.
Yeah, you need to definitely evaluate your client base, because the need for a dispatch center, when I had my company, John, was for apartment communities and HOA. So we had a lot of residential clients calling us, which were actually the residents that lived there. So that was a big cost for me to take those calls, because we needed to evaluate that, and we needed to take a look at how many calls were coming in per night.
Yeah, so some questions that you should be asking yourself. First of all, Chris, you hit the nail on the head. We need to be assessing how many calls per night that the supervisors are taking. This should be something that's very simple to collect and to record, especially if you're using something like SilverTrack. Either way, we need to make sure that you're getting an accurate number of calls per night. And then we need to know, are they being handed off effectively? So how effectively is that operation working for you right now? One tool that we're going to reference even more detail a little later on is making sure that you have a process fully written out for this. So what happens when a supervisor receives certain types of calls? We need to have that in place and then understand, is it an efficient process right now, or is it causing us some headaches?
Yeah, and if you're using software, you got to not only train your guys how to use it, but how to respond and how to report better too, to reduce those calls.
Yep. Another question to ask is, can the calls be reduced through some internal initiatives? And Chris, you have several strategies available for this. But if there's a way that we can reduce the number of calls that are coming, for example, if we're working a large apartment complex that has a lot of residents turning in phone calls, one thing that we can do is implement an online reporting module that will allow them to report those issues online. There, and sort of deflects the tickets from going straight to the officer or the supervisor.
Yeah, I've actually taught quite a few of our clients how to develop a resident portal page that allows residents to go via the web, because people are now carrying their tablets and they're carrying their phones, and it's a lot easier to report. And then number 2, teach the officers how to make a positive contact. Walk around with a business card with that information. It's a great way to introduce yourself to the client and offer that information to somebody on a contact level, right? Because think about it, 1 contact a day is 30 contacts a month. So great way to get a little customer service in at the same time.
Yeah, so Chris, why is this not just taking phone calls anymore? At this point in a business's life cycle, or this point in the lifespan of a security company, when you start having a call volume that's too much for a supervisor to handle, why are we talking about more than just simply taking phone calls?
Well, everybody loves to say they have a call center. So when you're telling a client you have a call center, you need to really evaluate what that really means, okay? Because they're going to expect a lot from you. Does that mean you're the residents, for an example, in an apartment community, or have the ability to call you 24 hours a day? Is it daytime? Is it evening calls? Are you going to allow them to call you for registering their vehicle, parking service issues, security after hours, right? So you need to really take a look at that before you start offering that kind of service, because it gets very, very expensive. And those calls, think about it, one apartment complex, John, of 500 units, that's 500 doors times 2 people living, that's quite a few calls a month, and that's just one contract.
And then we also have to consider some of the downsides of staying with having the supervisors receiving the phone calls. If you think about it, your supervisor or whoever's picking up that phone is the representation of your company to that caller. And so if you have someone who's not particularly trained to be customer service oriented, they're not trained in note taking or passing off these calls to someone specific, it's not a very scalable process in place, and it makes you seem a little small, especially if you just get an officer saying, hello. You know, I can't tell you, even during the day, Chris, how many times, like, we'll even call up some of our, unfortunately, some of our customers, you know, other companies in the industry, and just the lack of professionalism that you have on the phones. It really says a lot about your company when you don't have the call center really squared away.
Yeah, well, you see a lot of these guys take their field supervisors that are doing their spot checks for their account to try to take those calls. So the guy's got to obviously be prepared, have paper and pen in hand. The other side of it is you got to buy the guy an earpiece, because there's nothing more unprofessional where he's trying to drive. And you can't do that anymore, right? Can't answer your phone and drive in the car. And on top of that, you can hear the noise. They have their window down. It's summer night, right? So you have all this wind, and the client can't even talk to you. You're trying to report something, right? So it really does. It's a bad way to start business. It really is.
Yeah, and we're going to show several ways to make sure that cost of a call center, however you handle this, whether it's an in-house call center or you outsource this, we're going to show you some incredible ways to streamline this process and to really make this very efficient so that it isn't a huge cost to you and the return is much higher than what you invest. Well, SilverTrack Nation, we're going to take a quick pause and hear from our sponsors over at Paperless Proposal. But when we come back, we're going to talk about how to balance quality and cost when you move to the next step and either outsource your call center or bring someone in-house full-time. You're not going to want to miss that. Stay tuned. We'll be back with our feature conversation right after we hear from Paperless Proposal.
Does your security business need to create business proposals to win clients? Are you frustrated by how much time and resources it takes to create and manage your proposals? If yes, I want to introduce you to Paperless Proposal Software. With Paperless Proposal Software, you can easily create impressive business proposals in minutes. And Paperless Proposal Software allows you to quickly and easily track and manage all of your proposals. Get a free demo at www.paperlessproposal.com/SilverTrack.
Chris, when we talk about assessing the need and deciding whether or not to bring this in-house or to outsource it, there's really two major components to that decision-making process, and that is the quality of customer service that we're going to be offering and then the cost. Right, so let's run through a couple. In terms of the quality, customer service is extremely important. And so we need to make sure whether we do this in-house or we outsource it, that we are putting the best customer service in place.
Absolutely.
So we're going to look at first understanding. You need, whether it's someone in-house or it's an outsourced, a third party, you need to make sure that they're going to be able to understand and learn the operation. This really needs to be a cohesive part of your business, and they need to be an extension of who you are, the values that your company has, because they're, like I said, they're going to be acting on behalf of your company when they're on the phone with that caller.
Yeah. So let's step back just a second. So the other side too, John, if you're going to, before we even go there and we're going to outsource this, we have to look at the complaints and the reason why you're looking to outsource, right? So we all know we just talked about the car issue, but are you getting a lot of complaints? And then how many calls a night are you really taking, right? So something really, part of that information you have to have up front.
Yeah, and so when we do decide, now I guess to give a proper background on where we're at on in terms of this this process, we're discussing, we'll assess the need. If we decide, hey, there is a need, now the next decision is, do we outsource or do we bring it in-house? When we're making that decision, two things to consider: quality and cost. And when we're considering quality, we need to say, hey, can they be an extension of our operation? Can they really adapt to what we're doing? Can they effectively address the needs of the caller with high customer service skills? And are they going to be positive reflection on who we are as a company, right, Chris? Because there's nothing worse, and I know we've all experienced it. You call customer service or tech support for whoever it is, and that person that you're talking to really does form your opinion of that company, especially if you're a resident or a tenant, you're trying to handle a security issue. This is going to say a lot about your company.
Yeah, when I had mine, it was very important to me that they were willing to take my script and then operate as an extension of my company, customer service. I wanted callers to think that they were actually calling my company. So one of the things that's real important to make sure that they're willing to do that.
Yeah. Another thing to consider is, can they use your software? So they're going to need to be able to dispatch your officers. So they need your guard management or reporting software. Are they going to integrate with that? And also, are they going to integrate in with the scheduling system, whether it's in-house or outsource? Are they going to be able to look and see who's on site, who needs to be there, which officer are we contacting, and all of those details? Which leads us to, are they going to be responsible for managing the officers? That's certainly a role that you can put into the dispatch or the call center's scope of service or their job description when they're in-house. Not so much doable when it's outsourced. You really do limit, on the outsourced side, you really limit them to just receiving phone calls and dispatching issues or really relaying information. But we can recoup a lot of the cost if we have this in-house. We can give them more of a job and put more stuff on their plate so that your operation really does run efficiently.
Yeah, they're not going to, as I think we both know, they're not going to manage our officers, but it's real important. And what I'd like to be able to have the same dispatchers or the callers taking the phone calls. If the service or the call center had a high turnover themselves, it just makes it more difficult for you to have to retrain that person or for them to retrain that person. So when I had a good call center, the fact that they had a familiar person on the phone and then somebody that was familiar with their accounts or employees in the field was nice.
Another thing to consider is, how are they going to handle incidents reported by the officers? Are they going to be the liaison between the officer and the customer? Is the officer going to be allowed to directly contact the customer? How do you want that to be handled? How are they going to handle call off? So is this someone that the officers are going to call if they're calling off, or if there's a no-show at an account, or we need to have some emergency scheduling and send some additional officers out to the field? Who's that contact going to be? Can they communicate with the officers in the field? Do they need to be bilingual? And then another strategy that we've seen growing, Chris, is rolling in the CCTV accounts into like any type of like remote monitoring, rolling that into the call center. So now you have the officer or the call center handling a wide variety of jobs, but it's now that you're making it much more valuable for your company to take that from something handled in the field by a supervisor, bring them into the office, create a full-time job for them that really does add value to your business as you make this transition for your company. Yeah,
and if you're going to start doing all these things, you're going to definitely need a really good management software program, especially if it has to do with scheduling, if you want these, your call center to get involved like that.
So let's transition real fast before we wrap up this call and talk about when we're making this decision of outsourcing this or bringing it in-house. Obviously, cost is going to be something that we need to consider. So one tip is to convert everything. A lot of call centers, when you're outsourcing this, will do this priced on a per call basis. if you are going to do that, you need to find out what the hourly average is going to be, which is what we can do if we're tracking the number of phone calls that are currently coming in. We can find out what the average will be, and then let's compare that side by side with what it would cost to hire someone in-house. A lot of times you'll find it's cheaper to outsource it. Most of the time, in fact, it's going to be cheaper to outsource it. But like we've discussed, there's a number of advantages to having it in-house, because we can sort of boost their job description and their requirements, which will help take some stuff off of your plate as the owner, take some stuff off of the supervisor's plate, and then provide some additional customer service to your customers.
Yeah, and that's why it's going to be very important in the beginning too, John, to have at least a basic idea of how many calls you are taking and the type of calls you're taking before you go out and get a price, because it can bankrupt you if you're not careful.
Well, as we wrap up today's episode, be sure to visit the show notes section of this page at silvertracksoftware.com/42. That's silvertracksoftware.com/42 for episode number 42 here. And be sure to go download the ultimate guide to running your security dispatch center. This is just episode 1 in a 4-part series on us really diving into the nuts and bolts of running a call center and really optimizing your dispatch operations. And until next time, my name is Johnny Page.
I'm Chris Anderson.
This is a SilverTrack Extra, and we'll talk to you soon.
This has been another episode of the SilverTrack Extra. For more insider information, visit silvertracksoftware.com/extra. Listen on the go by subscribing in iTunes. Want to hear your questions answered on the show? Visit silvertracksoftware.com/questions to submit your requests.